Welcome to Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, promoting prosperity and harmony to help you flourish in all areas of life. Join in as we explore the motivations and goals of real estate investors and how their ability to invest abundantly has provided them with the time and freedom to contribute to the world in a creative and thoughtful way. Now please welcome your host, Dr. Allen.
Hello, enlightened investors. Happy to be back with you and engage with you in a conversation with the next player for the Oakland Raiders. Dr. Allen here with Logan Freeman, who in just 1 year completed 120 joint venture projects and equity partnerships. We're going to be inspired as Logan shares how he powerfully accomplished this impressive feat. Welcome, Logan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to add some value to all of your listeners today.
Robert Frost penned these words a long time ago. Two roads diverged in the wood and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all of the difference. So talk to us about a major fork in your road, and the choice you made has really made all the difference in your life.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And my sister actually gifted me all of his poems and writing in a book. And
is that right?
It's right over here somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it's at. Actually, I'm just going to pull this out. If people are watching, I kid you not, there it is.
Huh? Yeah.
So I've read his works and loved them. And so for me, there was a lot of forks in my young life. I realize I'm young still today, but I would say the biggest fork in my life happened over a period of 6 months. And as you mentioned, I was an ex-NFL football player. And when I was cut from the Oakland Raiders, I had identified as this athlete for, so long. I mean, probably 15 years or so up to that point. And so I had an identity crisis. I went back to school to finish my master's degree. I lost over 120 pounds physically, went through a major transformation. And I also lost my father to his drug and alcohol addiction during this period of time. And so this major fork in the road happened kind of from December all the way up until, I guess it was probably June until December. And there was all of these things that were kind of happening all at once. And my mom always said, really big things happen in threes in your life. And those are kind of three big things: going back to school, losing my father, and being cut from the NFL. So I had a big decision to make. And thankfully in my life, I've had some really great mentors across the board. And these were mostly my friends' fathers. I saw them having great marriages with their wives. Their kids were happy. They seemed really, really happy. They were very strong emotionally, but also spiritually and physically. So not just one thing were they really, really good at. And so I went to my mentors at that time, and I just kind of told them how I was feeling. And I think that I got some really good feedback from those guys that pointed me in the right direction. And one of them was to get really self-aware. And so take stock of who Logan Freeman is as an individual, as a person, as a man, as a brother, as a son, as a just human being, and figure out kind of who I was to my core. And so that took a lot of self-reflection. If you're watching the video, you can tell that I'm a devout Catholic, so I've got the Pope and my crucifix here too. So I spent a lot of time getting back into my faith. I read, a book called Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren at the same time. So I was really figuring out who I was as a person. And I just started reading books, listening to podcasts, and diving back into personal development, which was incredible for me because that kind of laid the foundation, I would say, for me to be able to go through this big fork in the road, but also understand that, who I was or what I was doing in life does not define who I am as a person. And I, up to that point, had based my self-worth upon the achievements in my life. I think there's a parenting methodology called, performance-based love, right? And as a new parent of two, I'm trying to make sure that I keep that kind of parenting maybe out of what I'm trying to accomplish. But, the way that I dealt with that was to be really self-aware, learn that there's been skills, that successful people have accumulated and developed. And I started to work on those skills because even though I had a master's program or degree, I had no real skills other than a work ethic, discipline, and focus. And I knew that I wasn't the smartest guy. I'm still not the smartest guy, but what I can do is apply myself to a goal, and I'm able to accomplish those goals. And so I think it was a big fork in the road for me in my life, going through all of those things kind of in a 6-month period that allowed me to develop into the man that I am today, Alan.
Well, there's a lot to unpackage in that
Sure.
particular statement there. Self-awareness and talking about self-awareness is one thing. Really coming to a full sense of self-awareness is definitely a process. It probably is a process that never really actually ends. You had said, though, that you had that your identity was really based upon achievement and identity with what you were as an athlete rather than who you were as a person. And you mentioned mentors, you mentioned reading, you mentioned going back to your faith, that all of those things were part of that process of self-awareness. Let's dig into that just a little bit more, because self-discovery is never really an easy process. You described it here. Well, I did this, and this. How did you actually take off all of those aspects of identification with who you were as an athlete and who you were as your achievements, and actually get down to that process of really understanding, accepting, and realizing that I am a person and then I am an achiever, separate and apart from that?
Well, I think the first step is to take stock of your God-given talents. And I'm going to say talents because talents can be cultivated into strengths. And there's a book that's right over here on my shelf called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And so I basically studied my realization was that, in business, there's skills, there's sales, there's marketing, there's operations, there's accounting, there's all of these skills or, functions of a business. I said, okay, well, what are the functions of a human being? Like, what are you made up of? And I realized that your IQ is pretty static. I think you can do a good job of becoming, more intelligent from reading and doing those types of things, spending time with the right people. But one thing that I could really control was what's called EQ, or my emotional quotient. And EQ is broken out into 4 different quadrants. The first being self-awareness, the second being self-management, the third is social awareness, and the fourth is relationship management. I was actually very high on self-awareness, not so high on social awareness and I was very high on self-awareness, not so high on self-management, very high on social awareness, but not very good with relationship management. So that helped me kind of develop what I'll call where needs that I needed to help develop. And so that book has a lot of exercises, a lot of thought processes that you can go through, and it also gives you scores. So you can score yourself where you're at when you first start, which I think my overall score when I first started was a 67. And every 12 months, I would be focused on one of the quadrants. And as I took it every single 12 months, I continued to increase that score. And I'm proud to say last year when I took it, I was a 93 on the emotional intelligence quotient. And that never stops. You always have to continue to develop those skills. And if you don't use them, they do go away. Additionally, during this period of time, the same guys or the same company that wrote that book wrote a book called Strength Finders 2.0. And so I also took into consideration, okay, well, what are my actual talents, that I have as a person? And my top 5 talents were identified as individualization. So I could see what other folks were going through. I could empathize with them. I could understand what they need, how they're feeling very quickly. It's a very rare top talent. The other ones were no, this is no surprise, but discipline, focus, achievement, and my last one was learner. And so I started to read about what those talents were and how they interacted with each other. And I took stock of, okay, well, if I'm really good at individualization, discipline, focus, achieving, and the last one was a learner, then how can I use those together? And so I started to, there's an expanded test that you can take. So I took the expanded test and I got all the full results, which was very, very eye-opening for me, which allowed me to say, okay, well, my sweet spot is somewhere between being able to be paid for my performance and achievement, but also needs to be somewhere where I can utilize my discipline, my focus, and my individualization, and my learner aspect in the business world. And so at the time, I was working as a franchise consultant with Jimmy John's, which, was not very much aligned with being able to be paid for your performance and or using my skills or my talents that I was developing into my strengths. And so I left that job and I went over to a sales-based job, which was based on the performance that you had in the business. And I also utilized my individualization to be able to build rapport with folks on the phone very, very quickly, and to be able to clearly and compelling in a concise way talk about the product or service that I was selling. And so I started to operate more in that sweet spot, I would say. And in that, I was in the wrong vehicle at the time. I was in a startup company, and then I went to a larger sales division in a different company. And I realized working at both of those companies that, I'm not made to be, my learner aspect is not really conducive for me to be working at a company. And so over 3 years ago is when I started my own company, which I had full direction over where I wanted to take it, but I also knew what that sweet spot was. And I tried to work in that sweet spot a lot. So for me, Alan, it was to take stock of who I was via, a tangible score and or a test that allowed me to understand who I was. And I also took the Colby and all of these other assessments, but those two had the most profound impact on me to allow me to work on my self-awareness and EQ quotient, as well as that sweet spot that I'm kind of talking about.
In this process, any of us in this process of growth and development, we have this aspect of denial. We can't actually see our blind spots. Did you have mentors, coaches, who was helping you to see the spots that you couldn't see, even with all your reading, studying, and learning?
So the purple book behind me is Think and Grow Rich, the workbook. And I read the book. That was a great book. But I also was like, okay, that's complete at the theoretical level. I need something effective at the applied level. And so I found this workbook. I started to go through this workbook. Well, one of the first chapters is what's called Masterminding. And I said, well, let me see in Kansas City what masterminds are available. I started attending groups. I realized that most of them were glorified, business networking events where people just exchange business cards. And so this isn't what I'm looking for. So I started to reach out to some folks here in Kansas City that I knew were trying to up their game, and I created my own mastermind. So for 6 years here in Kansas City, I not only had a mastermind group with 5 gentlemen that were really trying to live the life that I thought, was the right way to live. I had some folks that were already there with 4 or 5 kids. I had some folks that were younger that were trying to learn. I was somewhere in between. The law of 33% says you need to keep, 33% of your relationships with people above you, 33 that, are on the same level, and then 33 where you can help bring them up. And so I applied that same methodology to a mastermind group here in Kansas City. And then I started journals. And this was very, very important because I started journaling every single day. And I didn't just grab a notebook and start writing. I needed more of a guided journal that helped me understand how I could track towards my goals. So for 5 years here in Kansas City, I used Darren Hardy's Living Your Best Year Ever journal. And just 2 or 3 years ago, I started using a different one. But for 5 years, I used that journal to track my progress, my learnings. And then I would have weekly calls with one accountability partner who was not in the mastermind group. So I was getting another feedback point. I had a coach at the same time that I had hired and was paying. And I had the same mentor that I basically said, look, you're a successful sales professional. I would like to learn from you. So weekly, I'm going to lay out, 15 different topics that I want to cover this year with you. And weekly, I'd like to dive into those and get your feedback. So I had all of these different kind of data points in my life that were helping me see my blind spots, because you're 100% correct in the sense that, just take, for example, if you have you're looking at improving your golf swing. If you're out there swinging a golf club, you can't really tell what it looks like. But if somebody videotapes you and breaks that swing down, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's what my swing looks like. You can't see it. So I had all of these other people that were working towards the same goals, showing me where my blind spots were. But I had to be very coachable. I had to be very honest and very vulnerable through the process. And that's not easy for a lot of people to do. But I was able to do that with these gentlemen, these mentors, these coaches, these mastermind group that I all had. And I think that helped me. And I still have a lot of those same folks in my life today because it doesn't stop. The accountability and being able to see your blind spots is an ongoing process. But I've always put a lot of people in my life to help me along that process.
Well, let's talk a little bit here about, it sounds like you've had phenomenal growth and development since actually leaving the NFL. And in order to attain this growth, I mean, I think we all have to have identified to some degree or the other a purpose in life. And it seems to me that you probably have identified that. How did you identify it, and what is that purpose?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm just going back to all of these books, but I think that might be a theme here because it's so important for me and my personal and professional growth. But when I read Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life, it's a Christian book. So if that's not for you, that's okay. But I read that book, and I actually had one of my accountability partners out of my mastermind group who was I'll say he was farther along his growth and his faith, and he recommended that book to me. He coached me through that book. But, I felt like my purpose in life has always been to be able to tell my story in a way that helps other people not accept what I would call the socially accepted norms. And I've always thought a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is my dad, for all of the faults that he had in his life, he was a great man. And he had deep love for me in his life. And he always told me from maybe when I was like 4 or 5 years old, Logan, if you just set your mind to it, you can achieve it. And I know that sounds so fickle and so kind of cavalier, so to speak, but that I believed that my whole life. I said, well, if I apply myself and I set my mind to something, I can achieve it. And so that was very interesting kind of concept through me. And so when I was, playing football, I said, okay, well, I want to be able to bench press this, run this fast, do this, play varsity, get a scholarship, go to the NFL. All I was able to do was set my mind to one of those goals and actually achieve it. And so I just have this unwavering belief. And there's 2 parts. Lewis Howes, The School of Greatness, he's wrote 2 books now. One was The Masks That Men Wear, which was an incredible book that didn't get very much publicity because it's very controversial and a lot of people are not honest enough to read that book. But the second one was The School of Greatness, kind of compiling all of his awesome interviews together. Out of that, he always mentioned that to be a very successful person, not just in business, just in life, you have to have an unwavering belief in 1 or 2 things. And if both, even better, a higher power and in yourself. And so I took that to heart. And my purpose now, I realize, has been to say, okay, well, Logan, these are your God-given talents. It's up to you to develop them into strengths, but it's not for you to keep to yourself and just keep stored away in your basement. I'm in my basement right now. In my basement, just on a shelf somewhere. You are a guy that people just I'm 6'3", I'm 250 pounds. I'm tall, I'm tan. I just have a presence, and folks gravitate towards me. It just has happened my whole life. And I think that I have this magnetism towards me that people are like, okay, well, you know, he's doing that and this, and he seems like a good guy. He seems like he's got, you know, a well-rounded life. That to me is my purpose, is to be able to take my unwavering belief in God, but also in myself, and show folks that they can do the same thing, because I am nothing special. I'm unique in my very own way, as is everybody. But I didn't come from anything. I'm very small, minuscule person in this world. But I know that my purpose is to help other people kind of get past their self-limiting beliefs to live a life that they were meant to live. And it's not my job to tell you what that is. It's your job to self-discover, because if somebody else tells you what your purpose is, you're not going to believe it. You have to find it for yourself. And that was hundreds and hundreds of hours praying and sitting in silence and just self-reflecting. But I have a very strong purpose now that not only am I a husband, I'm a father, I'm a business person, and all of those things have accumulated into a vision, and a vision that I can help kind of people to live a life that they feel very, very full about. And you probably know this. I can't remember who said this quote, but you know, it said something along the lines of, let me go back into my archives here. To live life is one of the most rarest things in the world. And most folks just go in life kind of swaying to everything that's happening to them. And I butchered that quote. And it was on the movie Coach Carter. It was on that movie. I will have to find that quote. I'll send it to you, Alan, for folks, because it's fantastic. But the rarest thing in life is to actually live life. And so for me, my purpose is very Christian driven, to help enough people get to heaven, or at least try to get to that next level in their lives, and to realize that you don't have to just not enjoy this life. You actually get to live it to the fullest. And so helping people be uniquely who they are and being okay with that. I mean, I'm a millennial. I understand this. Social media is new. You can connect with anybody, anywhere, anytime. There's a lot of different opinions and perspectives out there. But the day that you accept who you are as a person and you start to love yourself is the day that you can actually start loving other people. And that took a long time for me to realize. And I think it's my purpose to use this natural magnetism that I have to help folks realize that same notion. And I'm very, very interested in continuing that mission on a daily basis.
My guest today is Logan Freeman. You can connect with Logan at LiveFree Investments.
Thank you for joining us on Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. For more information, as well as access to our free ebook on enhancing your well-being through real estate investing, be sure to connect with us at steedtalker.com. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine and enhance the humane treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. Connect with us at steedtalker.com.